communal violence bill that came under the governance of the last Prime Minister before the present one, Manmohan Singh, and it assumed, the bill a priori assumes whenever there is a violence, it is the only majority who is doing it, and they will be held guilty, sort of, in a way. So that's kind of quite asymmetric. I mean, it is so much asymmetry is hard to find in laws. Then, of course, Manmohan Singh, that Prime Minister, he actually said that Muslims have the first right to first claim on resources. And that's kind of something that shows the priorities are not exactly Hindus, right? It's other way around. A liberal historian, Ramchandra Guha, he said that the road in New Delhi cannot be named by Shivaji because this will be an act of majoritarianism. Now, of course, Shivaji is a very revered person in Indian history, and he is considered the person who is responsible for bringing end to the regime of Aurangzeb, of tyrant, a bigoted person and a tyrant in the 17th century. As a matter of fact, Rabindranath Tagore, who is actually a Bengali, not a Marathi icon like Shivaji, he actually praised Shivaji heavily in his book, and he said that this should be the icon of the India. But anyway, because he is a Hindu, apparently naming any road is sort of not proper. According to Ramchandra Guha, he is a very celebrated liberal historian whose books are sort of taught even in many places. Now, Hinduism, is it not a religion? Is it not an LPS? Actually not. Because Hindus believe in a cyclical theory. They believe the four yugas going and cyclically, dharma, adharma cyclically. They know that things up and down. They don't believe in a Hindus will grow and take over the world. Nobody believes that. No Hindu believes that. And then Gandhiji said, I am a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, a Parsi, a Jew. And the Jinnah, he retorted that only a Hindu could say that. Basically, he's saying that Hinduism is different. We don't believe in those sorts of things. And Nehruji, he also said that Hinduism as a faith is vague, amorphous, many-sided. It means all things to all men. It is hardly possible to define it.
Namaste and welcome to another episode of Indic Talks organized by Center for Indic Studies, Indus University. Today we talk about a book, The Majoritarian Myth, which demonstrates that the concept of majoritarianism, which is extremely prevalent in the social sciences, is founded on a totally unscientific basis. The concept of a majoritarian Hindu cannot explain any of the empirical reality of the social phenomenon in India. In fact, with a historical analysis, we posit that the road to social harmony cannot lie with cultural Marxism and its progenitor, liberalism, but only in the ageless Indic ideas of Satya and Ahimsa. To elucidate this idea further, we have the very author of the majoritarian myth, Kausik Gangopadhyay ji, who is an economist who earned his PhD from the University of Rochester. He is a professor in the Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode. He has published many articles in reputed international journals and has a co-edited book published by Springer Verlag. He also enjoys writing popular articles, having published in outlets like DNA, First Post, Swarajya, and Mathrubhumi. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to take over from here.
Namaste. Thank you, Ajashri, for a very kind introduction. And thank you very much for having me here to talk about my book. So this is the book. Those who are not having it, I hope I'll be able to motivate them a little bit more after this talk. So I have 1 hour and I'll try to stick to the time. So I'll not talk everything that book has, but I'll talk a very significant proportion of it. So there are 5 sections in this book. The first section deals with the power of this majoritarian myth, how powerful it is in the world. I mean, many of us may not exactly know the idea of majoritarianism. but it controls a significant part of our thought process. Second part, I go in brief about the origin of the myth. Third section is my hypothesis. What I think is problematic for tolerance in the world. The roles, I call it linear theory of social evolution, LTAC. You'll be seeing it all the time. Fourth section, unlike other studies in social sciences, I just don't posit a theory. I actually test the theory against the alternative. And I have shown that compared to the majoritarian hypothesis, this is way more successful in explaining the reality. And the last section is on Satya and Ahimsa for social harmony. So this is about the Indic ideas, uh, how it is very key to ensure social harmony, and they are absent in the Western ideas, at least not the ones that we know as of today. So let's welcome and start it. So first idea is about the word called myth. Myth actually looks to us some word like ancient tales, or which is not really historic. But this is the idea of myth I've explained, borrowing from a person. His name is Sohail Inayatullah. He is actually a futurologist, very celebrated one, and he has a framework which is called causal layered analysis. So if you go to this framework, there are layers of thinking. At the very surface level, you see a problem, and then what are the causes of the problem. But then if you deep down there's a lot of assumptions inside us we believe in, and these assumptions form our worldview, and from that worldview we see these causes. And the key to our worldview is even deeper, and they are called the metaphors and myths. So this is the myth I'm talking about throughout this analysis. And this myth means essentially some deep ideas that we really believe it, that is feature of the society and civilization. And they remain till the civilization remains. After something significant strikes at the civilization, then essentially we get rid of the myth. That's how it is. We'll talk about it. But that's, I mean, I postpone the discussion of myth because we don't have too much time on dealing with it. But this is what the idea of myth is. So now what happens in media? We have this majoritarian myth. What is this majoritarian myth? Majoritarianism says essentially that the minorities are always oppressed. If you observe it or not, they are always oppressed. And there are some fancy terms called structural violence. Now, if you have this myth, if you really believe it, now I am not never disputing the intent of the people who are actually believing the myth. They are actually doing it in very well-intentioned way. They actually want to do good for the society. But what are they believing in? Let's look at it. So I have given two cases. The first case is Hafiz Junaid. So this is a very teenager who actually were killed in a train, and this is in Haryana. And basically, the justice of this particular case, Honorable Justice, he has observed that the person has observed the dispute between the parties was only regarding the seat sharing and abuses in the name of caste and nothing more. As BBC is saying, Muslims, not a particular one Muslim, many Muslims on Indian train assaulted because they ate beef. And this became a very big headline all over the world. But then if you look at the another person, this Umesh Kole, he was killed a few days ago. And that basically the assassins actually came, the police actually tracked, and they found that they did not take anything valuable from Umesh. They tracked him and then killed him, possibly because he liked some of he has some in social media or somewhere, he kind of shared the sentiment of Nupur Sharma. He supported Nupur Sharma, who was considered to be sort of like I don't know, committed heresy or something like that by the Muslims. So essentially, this is completely Umesh Kolbe is definitely a case of uh, religious hate, but it is not mentioned anywhere in the media like that. Then, if you look at another celebrated case, Akhlaq of Dadri, so he was killed for having beef actually in his house, 2015, and very shortly afterwards, a person, Prashant Pujari, he was from Karnataka, he was also killed by six assailants. Now there are difference. Difference is the crime is basically same. Akhlaq of Dadri, he killed a calf and then he was allegedly a repeat offender. But of course, this is more about religious hate. I would agree on that. That there is a religious angle to that. And if we find the global media, there are 1,915 results, a huge number of results on it. But if you look at Prashant Pujari, again, he was also a victim of similar things. He was a cow protection, he has a passion for cow protection, and he was hacked to death by six violent assassins. But then in this case, the results are only 141, very, very less. In the global mainstream media. And then, of course, there is a lot of difference in the headlines. In Akhlaq's case, it's like the footprints of Nazi Germany is coming and all these kind of things. And in case of Akhlaq, it's a law and order issue, and sort of like indirectly, he was also blamed because was doing this activism. So you can see the worldview of the people who believe in this majoritarian myth. So basically, they are sort of believe that majority's atrocities committed by majority has to be highlighted. That's why you can see like 13, 14 times more news results on because of death of Akla. But on case of when the minorities they commit something, it has to be kept under the carpet, and that's why you can see so few. So and you can see it's for the big massacres also. In 1990, there is a big, I think the biggest post-partition displacement of people when the Kashmiri Pandits they are driven out from the Kashmir Valley, and it was done by the religious hate only. And but in this particular case, you can see only 1,800. But if you look at this 2002 post-Godhra riots, and you can see one thing: 1990 it was a completely one-sided affair. Not a single Kashmiri Muslim was killed or anything like that. But so many pandits, like or more than 1,000 Kashmiri pandits actually were killed before they left the valley. But if you look at this post-Godhra riots, here it's not. It's, of course, it is true that Muslims died much more than Hindus, but still a lot of Hindus, actually 250 Hindus also died. It is not that much one-sided affair. But still, if you look at the report, 16 times more, and it is all blaming the majority for majoritarianism. The same thing is true about 1984 massacre as well. Um, so the point I'm trying to highlight is that people really believe in this myth, and that's how the global media they present one side of the story more than the other side because they are well intentioned and they believe that this is how they can keep peace at society. Now I have done this global survey for 3 years, 1st January 2020 to 31st January 2022. And there are 88,806 mentions in the database of these two words, majoritarian or majoritarianism. This is the database is called Global News Stream Database. It's available in ProQuest. Now, you may not be many, so these mentions are not always newspapers. They can be defense thesis, they can be different kinds of theories. So, but not always it is the case that they can be linked to a particular majority from the text itself. So when they do not specifically mention the name of the community, I can say. But sometimes they say this is the majority for which I'm saying. That's 1/5 of the cases. And there, this is the distribution. So the Hindus of India, they are like 80% of the time they are blamed for being majoritarian. The Buddhists or Sinhalese of Sri Lanka, they are blamed around 8% of the time. It's a big number, right? Out of the global population, Hindus are 15%. Singhal would not be even, I don't know, maybe may not be even 1%, right? But still, they are mentioned so much of the time. The whites of USA are like 2%. There might be also some small qualitative difference, but I'm not going into there. So you can see more than, and there are other times India also mentioned. So sometimes these called Hindi speakers. Now, of course, it might be linguistics, but many times what happens, the foreigners, Americans, a lot of the times I have found, they cannot distinguish between the ideas of Hindu and Hindi. For them, it looks like the same thing, right? So it could also potentially indirectly could accuse. And of course, there are Hindus and Buddhists of South Asia. They are also mentioned 0.7% of the time. So it basically shows that basically this is a sign of blame Hindus are getting all the time for being majoritarian. Now it's possible that in Indian constitution and everywhere else, because Hindus are the majority, the constitution actually runs by them and they have more power. And that's why they're legitimately blamed for being majoritarian. And let's see whether that is at all the case. Now, if you look at the Indian constitution, actually Hindus have enjoyed less rights than the other religious minorities. So, for example, Article 25. So basically, well, it is not explicitly gives anyone different, but the point is, it says that propagation of religion as an institutional propagation of religion is a valid thing. But of course, Hindus, they did not know the idea of propagation of religion at all. It's not a missionary religion. So at the moment, it is allowed as legitimate. In the real world, the Hindus, they have to actually make some, they have to form counter movement, right, to stop this conversion. Otherwise, they will be abolished, right, in a way. So that's why when they do that, people will accuse them of being changing, right, changing their religious nature. They'll be accused of being getting aggressive, fascist all the time. So it is indirect. But there are other things, and I have shown that in my book that this is not something that everybody does. In fact, some countries, like for example, I have given the notion of Greece. In the Greece, there's an Orthodox church, and they don't basically proselyte, more or less. And their Protestant denominations were bent on proselytizing others. So the Greek Orthodox Church has to be protected, they felt. And in their constitution, they say that anyone can practice any religion they want, but the institutional propagation of religion is not present. It is not allowed. So if you feel like after going through your debates and everything want to take a different religion, that's fine. But it's not like people will come to you all the time and they will blame someone. There are period people, right, who are coming to you all the time and they're saying your religion is the problem, your religion is the problem all the time, and they are, and that's how people are changing their thought. That's not what is allowed. Then Article 28, it is actually explicit discrimination against the Hindus, because this article says that no religious text. So the Hindus' seminal ideas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Gita, Jataka, Upanishad, they cannot be taught as a religious text. You can tell the story or something, but the idea behind the story, how the word dharma works, and these things cannot be taught in the public education system. Or and but in the same article that says minorities, they are free to teach all these things in their own education system. Now in Article 30, actually it says that only the minorities they can run their education institution, but the majority cannot. This is a very distinct asymmetry it has. So I have given many other examples. Some of them are not related to exactly, some of them have some constitutional basis, others are related to politics. For example, there is a communal violence bill that came under the governance of the last prime minister before the present one, Manmohan Singh, and assume the bill a priori assumes whenever there is a violence, it is the only majority who is doing it, and they will be held guilty, sort of in a way. Uh, so that's kind of quite asymmetric. I mean, it is uh, so much asymmetry is hard to find in laws. Uh, then, of course, Manmohan Singh, that prime minister, he actually said that Muslims have the first right uh, to first claim on resources. Uh, and that's kind of something that shows the priorities are not exactly Hindus, right? It's other way around. There is a liberal historian Ramchandra Guha. He said that the road in New Delhi cannot be named by Shivaji because this would be an act of majoritarianism. Now, of course, Shivaji is a very revered person in Indian history, and he is considered the person who is responsible for bringing end to the regime of Aurangzeb, of tyrant, a bigoted person and a tyrant in the 17th century. As a matter of fact, Rabindranath Tagore, who is actually a Bengali, not a Marathi icon like Shivaji, he actually praised Shivaji heavily in his book, and he said that this should be the icon of the India. But anyway, because he is a Hindu, apparently no road, naming any road is sort of um, not proper. According to Ramchandra Guha, he is a very celebrated liberal historian whose books are sort of taught even in many places. Then there is a government control of Hindu temples, so government doesn't control the other religions, say other religions institutions like mosques or churches, but they do control the Hindu temples, and revenues are may not be used as per the wishes of the Hindus, but as per the wishes of the governments. So there are also issues for that scholarships are given for minority religions, for persons from minority religions, which is again goes against the sort of idea of equality. So I'm showing that you cannot be, if you look at very casually things and even very deeply, you can see actually the Hindus, they are actually not getting equal status but less status as per the constitution and the politics. And of course, I have given us the example of judiciary as well. So the question is then, why is the media always saying majoritarian Hindu? That's not a proper, right? That's sort of like paradox. I'll resolve the paradox later while talking about this book. It resolves towards the end of the day, but that's pretty much it. So this is what the summary I just said. And mm, yeah, so now we go to the next section of my book, which is about the history of the idea of majoritarian. I'll go it briefly and not cover all the points because it is sort of not central, but I'll talk the main points. So the idea that majority could be wrong, that was known long time ago. The Greek philosopher Plato, he has a book, and where he actually talked about uh, and give an example of a ship where basically some problems are happening. And he's saying, should you listen to the people in the ship generally, or should you look at the basically the people who had the idea of navigation? And the conclusion is the majority can be discarded because they are not really have the knowledge, domain knowledge, and but the only the navigators they have the domain knowledge, right? We are just saying, or should we look at basically the pilots and co-pilots? I think that's kind of the same idea. Look at the pilots and co-pilots because they have the knowledge of aviation, unlike the passengers who may not have the knowledge. So that kind of discarding majority, that is about not based on identity. It is based on the knowledge and education and all these kind of things. And that idea was prevalent throughout ages. There are many people who talked about it. John Adams, U.S. president, he also talked about it. Now, the other idea is again, so one of these persons who talked about this idea is Alexis de Tocqueville, a French diplomat, visited America, and he has a book. The book is, I think, the book is called Democracy. I forgot exact, not the name exactly, not coming to my mind. It's there, of course, in my book. And in this book, there is a chapter which is called the Tyranny of here's the book, Democracy in America. And basically, there is a chapter called Tyranny of the Majority. So basically, he resented in America all the both the houses, parliament houses, right? Now we call it House of Representatives. They're all actually sort of elected directly by the population, by majority, right? And everything is by majority. But in the Europe that time, that was not the system. The lower house is to be elected by the majority, France, England, and all these cases. But the upper house is to be by the elites who has the domain knowledge how to do governance. That was the case in those cases. And so he was saying basically the domain knowledge is not basically emphasized, and that's what he called the tyranny of the now, next person in line who changed this thing is John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill has a book on liberty. And in this book, he actually said that the majority could oppress the minority. And here, Stuart Mill is using the words majority and minority in an identity sense. So they are not really knowledgeable minority or ignorant majority, but it is about two different people who differ based on their religion or race or something. Those are possible, and they are basically one could actually have legislation that goes against the other. But then he says, okay, but who is the most oppressed minority? That is the individual, he says. Because he is a minority of one. He does not have anyone with them. So the individual rights has to be more and more. That's what he said. And he said that freedom of expression has to be there. So nowadays the majoritarianism, those who resent majoritarianism, they don't say the freedom of speech and all these things. But that was the central idea of John Stuart Mill to stop majoritarianism. And then things changed very drastically after the arrival of Marxism in the 20th century. Now, one person who is very seminal on that is called Gramsci. Antonio Gramsci was a Italian communist. I think there's a mistake in this slide. It would be 1937. I mean, he was born in 1891 and he died in 1937. So he actually gave the very different way to the Marxian framework. And he's in this framework, he said the culture is very fundamental. And therefore, he said the cultural classes, they could actually fight each other. And because they are, so in the original Marxism, we know that this bourgeoisie, the middle class or capital class, people having some capital, they're oppressing the people without capital, right? Haves versus have-nots, we call it, or bourgeoisie versus proletariat. So that was the idea. Now, in this system, Gramsci said basically anyone can fight anyone. It could be that basically the Hindus are fighting Muslims, or the people who speak Hindi, they are fighting people who speak Marathi. So all these things are now possible because in this Gramscian framework, the majority is basically oppressing the minority. And because this framework now went to the American Academy, so there's a person, Herbert Marcuse, he was from this. So basically, Gramsci's legacy was born by Frankfurt School. This is again an academic community in Germany. And these people were some kind of based on all these cultural Marxist ideas. And then when Hitler took over Germany, he started doing a lot of persecution on the Jews. But these people who started all these things, they are many of them were Jews. Maybe a lot, most of them, and they had to get out of Germany. And so when they left for America, and when they entered America, all these ideas actually came to Harvard and Berkeley, all these places, and those places, this what we call nowadays liberal arts and humanities. All their theories actually they started from them, and that's how it became the study part of the liberal arts framework. And that's how these media persons nowadays, they are trained in this framework and they see the world like that. That's what we described in the section. Yeah. Now Gramsci basically said the traditional ideas are wrong and this fight has to happen so that we'll have a great society. But of course, I don't see any reason why should a person who spend a lot of his time in prison have a understanding what sustains society for centuries. He could have a theory that could hurt society, but he may not be able to. It's always easier to hurt someone, right? I can hurt myself with a blade, but to kill someone, you need swords and other things, right? So it is easier to give some idea that will hurt society. It is very difficult to create and make society, and that's why I think we should take all these things a pinch of salt, and that's what has not been done so far. Now, this is basically the case. Now, of course, in India, things are a little different, but you can trace the idea to Nehru. But there are also a lot of colonial legacies there. But I leave it at that because the time is not unlimited as it should be. Everybody should have a value of time. And then I will go into the next section where I posit a very different idea, which is called linear theory of social evolution and how it influences intolerance. Now, Gramsci's idea cannot be contested if you think really that societies are based on uh, identities, really, and these identities they are fighting each other, and they are all symmetric. If they are all symmetric, of course, the majority can fight minority, and of course, they can actually oppress minority. So those are the possibilities, realm of possibilities. Now, but is it the case really that societies are all symmetric? There is no evidence ever given. And that's what I think in some sense, people acknowledge that societies are not symmetric. So when this debate on uniform civil code was going on, and I'm listening very intently to the proponents against of those opponents of UCC, and they are actually proponents of majoritarianism. So they are actually saying that UCC cannot be done because, of course, all societies are not in the same cultural footing. So they are actually acknowledging that different communities are not exactly symmetric. So I try to take this idea seriously here. But before going that, I try to motivate the idea through an economics example. So in economics, what happens? There is an idea called externality. What is externality? Suppose you are doing some action, but that actually hurts someone else. Now, then basically the person who is getting hurt, that person has to be compensated. So that's called the idea of the externality. So, for example, this factory, right? Factory is actually taking a lot of fumes out, poisonous fumes, and that is affecting people living here. So that these people has to be compensated somehow. Then there are some trains in the 19th century. That used to actually give some sparks. And suppose you're a farmer, you have something here, you have showed something here, and that you cannot reap because these sparks will destroy all your harvest. And then let's look at the rabbit farmer and a lettuce farmer. Someone is growing lettuce, someone side by side growing rabbit. Of course, the rabbits will come, can't contain them, and they will eat the lettuce, right? So it is actually hurting lettuce. So the original idea was by one economist, Arthur Pigou, and Pigou says, okay, call the factory as aggressor and call the other people living there as victim and make the factory compensate the person. And then here the train is the aggressor to make the train company compensate the farmer. Here the rabbit farmer is the aggressor and he must compensate the lettuce farmer. Now this idea was okay, but there is a major hole there. And the hole was pointed out by Ronald Coase. He is also a very celebrated economist. He got Nobel Prize um, I think he's regarded as one of the greatest Nobel laureates on the 20th century. So Ronald Coase says, well, there is no really aggressor and victim. Suppose you think that the factory is hurting the human being, but who told them to set up their house there? It's possible that if you always blame the factory, make them pay people, then people will actually come to settle near because they are getting free money, is it? Suppose you think that train is actually hurting the farmer, farmers actually could sow their uh, so they can cultivate little far right from the train tracks. But because they know the trains will anyway spend money, give them money, so they actually put things their fields very close to the track so that they don't need to do any effort for growing crops, but they can always claim the train has done some injustice to them. So the same idea can go all the direction. So Ronald Coase says, don't blame one person and other person. Just say that both persons could be guilty, and we have to see what is the proper way to do. Now, so this is the idea. Now, we are actually taking the same idea here. We are saying, suppose you think the majority is the aggressor and minority is the victim, then minority doesn't have any incentive to behave soberly manner, to behave nicely. They know that they will always get the they'll always get the pass, that they are not the right wrong. So always they will be. But so that's why this is actually the idea of the Ronald Coase. So this those who believe in minority, they are doing the Pigouvian idea, but that's not the right idea. The second thing is basically uh, what is the solution? The solution is basically should be the reduction of social intolerance by the most intolerant person negate. Because if you don't negate the most intolerant person, he will keep on doing it. The other persons will have to pay the price. So the good thing is you have to negate the most intolerant person rather than calling someone aggressor and negating that. Now I illustrate this with two communities. Let's say there is a community A who are very peace-loving community, and here is the community Z which is very intolerant. Now what happens before modernity? The modernity A always used to accommodate people, and in they used to give refuse to other people, would accept others' viewpoint. But community Z, they were not like that. They used to not persecute others for different views. Now, when the modernity comes, community A does not suffer any big problem because they are always like that. But community Z, it's a big change because they cannot impose. So what they can do? So community A will not do much, and because they always used to accommodate, they don't accuse others also. They understand there's different points of view. Community Z, because they never used to accommodate others. Suddenly they see other points of view. They call others intolerant because they feel like their way is the right way. So this is an example, and there are many examples here. Now, what happens if you look at this linear theory of social evolution, LTAC? So I call a community or culture. So this is my hypothesis. If the culture has some LTAC, then it can be more intolerant. Because what happened, this is what the Harari said, or this is the acknowledged wisdom. Man is made of imagined reality. You imagine a reality, our mind becomes hooked to that. And someone negating the reality becomes a problem. So, what is the reality? So, in LTSE, linear theory of social evolution, in the culture, it gives a plan that will linearly happen. It will not be any cyclical ups and downs. It will always grow one direction. This is the plan given. And this plan cannot be changed because of the data or evidence. This is given, so it has to be. The believers in the plan, they have to, the second is the second characteristic. They have to practice otherization. Suppose you don't believe their plan, then you have to treat people differently because you don't believe it. Now, this is not a, well, this is my theory, but of course, this has been there, this is there already as a psychological theory. By two very famous, one poll, basically this theory says people can categorize themselves, make social groups, and there can be in group, inside their group, intra group, there can be bonding. But outside they could actually act as a group, and they can collectively act as a political group. They can consider themselves superior, and they can extract greater concession. That's how the theory says. My theory is consistent with what they are proposing. Now, if you look at the past, it all started with the political Christianity, and this is the pre-Christian world. The Harari writes, you all know Harari, that there is the Greek historians, Chinese historians, they did not have the idea of any linearity. They say, used to say the world is cyclical, ups and downs. Sometimes this grows, sometimes that grows. But Christianity, they say one way, linear way. They say Christians are growing and others are falling. Right? This is what the theory is. This is the linear plan they believe in till the judgment day. So of course there I'll talk about the difference between a political Christian and a normal Christian in a little while. But now this thing is a faith, so that means you can't change it. Even though you show 100 evidence against it, it's part of their faith, so it can't be changed. Second is otherization. So because the other people are inferior, so those people atrocities against these people is sort of justified. So political Christianity was there to speak the medieval times. And that time, so there is a dogma that they'll go to hell or something like that. And the Christians, good Christians, they'll go to heaven. So this hell is of course, a metaphor, or it can be afterlife thing, but it makes real, right? Because we believe in imagined reality. And you can think these people who are going for hell, they're inferior. And there are a lot of atrocities happened on innocent population, like during the Goa Inquisition. There's a book by A.K. Priolkar, and then series of native historians. And there's a book by the American Holocaust by Stannard. And all these things, they were very, very aggressive, present, vitriolic. Um, um, so then there's also last thing is Christian law. They did not admit the right of the non-Christian indigenous Americans, right? Because the Christian, these people are has to be treated differently. So they have taken over the Red Indian lands very aggressively till 19th century, because they were empowered by these dogmas. So now, we know that political Christianity is an LDS. What are the other ones? So here is the other ones I've identified: political Islam, communism, Marxism, Nazism, racism, cultural Marxism, or liberalism. And these other things, nationalism, Hinduism, or Hindutva, these are not LTSs. I'll explain shortly, but I'll explain all of them very shortly. So Yuval Noah Harari, but this actually conquers with two persons. One is Harari, of course. In his book Sapiens, he wrote Nazism, communism, liberalism, they are just religions like Christianity and Islam. Now Harari is a macro historian, so he did not look into the details, but most scholars they agree that Hinduism is not in the same vein. Hinduism, Buddhism, all these things, as Christianity or Islam, because these are constructed religions in the 19th century. There is also a right-wing scholar, Yoram Hazony, who actually wrote a book, The Virtue of Nationalism, and he has listed down the imperialisms, and they match my LDSs point by point. So this is also similar. So they are both different sides. Yuval Noah Harari is a liberal historian, more on the liberal side, and Yoram Hazony on the conservative side, but they both agree on that. Now, again, I'll just go 1 minute over each of them. So basically, communism, Marxism, again, this is a plan of bringing equality in the world towards a globe that is fully equal. And then those who are oppose this plan are called reactionaries, and they are called the wrong side of history, and they have to be dealt accordingly. There's one of the most polished persons, communist, was Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was kind of called basically a very nice person, but even Trotsky wrote that whenever communists is confronted with armed conspiracy, attempt of murder rising, it will hurl at the heads of the enemies an unsparing penalty. So basically, there is no idea of there is some sort of otherization, because a lot of the times these are not exactly crimes, right? Rising is basically everybody has a right to express their point of view or difference in opinion. But he's saying that even for that, you can be killed. So it shows actually extent of otherization. Then there is a cultural Marxism, as I told, and in this cultural Marxism, basically the liberal theories actually liberal theories they institute this cultural Marxism, And these theories are summed nowadays by this called diversity, equality, inclusivity, and whatever it means. And those who differ from that, they have to be otherized. Their freedom of speech has to be negated. Like Hersi Ali, she is a believer in all these things in her own sense, but because she does not believe in some of the theories they say, that's why she cannot speak most of the American universities. And if she goes, there will be demonstrations. She has to be withdrawn. So there are a lot of evidences given by Gadsad in his book, The Parasitic Mind, how these people are otherized and how this thing is practiced. And there is also Gramsci, who elated this intolerance. He said that intolerance is very critical. So all these characteristics are matching the anti-thesis of liberalism. Then political Islam, I think less said is better, people know it. But what I wanted to say, this is actually pointed out by Karl Marx himself in 1854 on this Ottoman state. And he wrote basically the idea of this LTSE in this political Christianity and all these issues. Now, there are also racism, like including Nazism is a part of racism. So again, the same idea, basically one race will linearly take over the world, right? Again, same sort of idea. This is only not only Nazism, there's also racism in Rwanda by this Hutu and Tutsis, and this is led by European historiography. It's also happening in India in terms of happened or happening in India in alien invasion theory and Dravid being the separate race. Now, some people will say, well, you are saying, are you blaming all the Muslims and Christians? Of course not. A lot of religions is made of theory and a lot of experience. And experience outgrows the theory completely. If you look at the Pew survey, 70% of the Christians, they agree that many religions lead to eternal life. And 53% they said Hinduism is also can lead to eternal life. So you can see that most Christians in USA, they are not political Christians anymore. But of course, there is also a lot of Islam. There may not be political Islam. That's what claims Farooq Dhonde in his book Rumi, and he says that basically there is Sufism, which is the judicial literal Islam. They're in conflict. And there are a lot of issues, but a lot of these people, they see themselves and experience driven. So I leave it the people to read the book. But of course, a basic point is made. Now, Hinduism, is it not a religion? Is it not an LTS? Actually not. Because Hindus believe in a cyclical theory. They believe the four yugas going and on cyclically, dharma, cyclically. They know that things up and down. They don't believe in a Hindus will grow and take over the world. Nobody believes that. No Hindu believes that. And then Gandhiji said, I am a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, a Parsi, a Jew. And the Jinnah, he retorted that only a Hindu could say that. So basically, he's saying that Hinduism is different. We don't believe in those sorts of things. And Nehruji, he also said that Hinduism as a faith is vague, amorphous, many-sided. It means all things to all men. It is hardly possible to define it. And that's also true. Because S.N. Balgangadhara, he's a very erudite scholar, ex-president American Academy of Religions for 3 years. He has shown basically Hinduism is not a religion. If the religion is basically something defined as Christianity, it's not a religion, it's a different category altogether. Yeah, so now what about the Hindutva? Now Hindutva basically there are 3 strands of Hindutva I talked about. So let's talk. First strand is about Rabindranath Tagore and Chandranath Bose. Chandranath Bose he started, then Rabindranath Tagore, and that strand, I'm not putting here, but that is also very universal. Then there is Savarkar, who wrote the book The Essence of Hindutva, and here in this book he actually saying that majority of the Indian Muslims, they are as patriotic and noble-minded as they have always been doing. So basically, he's saying that Mohammedans or Muslims are no way inferior to him. There are some issues in their education, which is a basic academic fact. But apart from that, there is nothing against them. And then in this Hindu Mahasabha manifesto, it's a party of whose Savarkar was the president for a long time. And it says that in conformity of the constitution, all citizens be treated equals before the law. So there is no LTSE, there is no differentiability status. Now, if you look at this current strands of Hindutva, which is by RSS and BJP. Now there are a lot of people who actually call them Nazis or something like that. And when this Atal Bihari Vajpayee government they came to power in 1996, before that, I read a lot of articles that soon Holocaust will start in India and everything. So after 25 years, 28 years have passed. I think I'm still looking for that Holocaust to happen someday. Yeah. So now, if you look at these riots and other things, these are real statistics, real world. So I'm saying that there are a lot of scholars who call them Nazis, but their prediction power is very, very less and almost zero. But if you look at the real world, so I don't take these theories, cannot take these theories too seriously. And there are a lot of scholars like Kundra Dels and Aravindan Nilakandan, they actually defended and they have, but I'll not go into that kind of theoretical exercise. I'll look at the evidence. Let's see the evidence. Let's look at the number of riots. Now, before Modi, after Modi, number of riots has actually come down. And if you look at the pro-minority scholarship, that has gone up after Modi came to power. There are welfare schemes, basically no allegations of any discrimination from the minorities, that they are discriminated in the welfare schemes or anything like that. Nothing happened like that. Although it is said that Muslims actually are bigger than their proportion, they represent bigger than their proportion in these recipients of these minority schemes, welfare schemes. But still nothing, and actually number of people who still successful in bureaucrat positions actually has actually increased after Modi came to power. No LTC is observed here. So there's a one way, it's a little digression. So there's a famous person called Karl Popper who actually said that unlimited tolerance actually leads to empowerment of the intolerant, and therefore the tolerance will disappear. But he is not saying the majority minority. He is saying that different people, some are more tolerant, some are more intolerant. It is consistent then with them, consistent with his idea or hypothesis. Now there are two hypotheses now, and this is my section 4, and we'll test them. These two hypotheses. One is the majoritarian hypothesis, the majority is guilty, and second is the LTC hypothesis. This majoritarian hypothesis says that the majority is the cause of intolerance. The LTC says LTC, a popular group community with LTC, they are the cause of intolerance. Now let's look at the genocides. So there are many genocides. But I look at the 10 genocides that basically Western world they are serious of. They are not chosen by me. They are sort of whatever is acknowledged in Western media. And here you can see that almost everywhere there is some kind of an LTC. So Rwanda genocide happened. So these are ordered from the reverse chronological order. So last happened is Rwanda genocide 1994. There's LTC. The Hutus will take over the Tutsis like LTC racism. Involvement of the majority, maybe a lot of people participated here. Actually, here more 10%. Cambodian genocide. It happened in 1970s, and they are basically the Cambodian population. 1/4 of them perished in labor camps. Of course, there is an LTC, Marxism, right? They have a theory, and their theory has to be guided. Is the majority involved? Not really. Majority did not willingly said that genocide is 1/4 of us. They has to follow the system. That's what they're saying. They did not have a choice as individuals. If you look at the Bangladesh genocide by Pakistani army, 1971, and then genocide perpetrated by Nazis in World War. Yeah, of course, there's an LTC, there's a political Islam, there's a Nazism, but majority involved, not really. Only 1 lakh Pakistani soldiers were there in Bangladesh. The vast majority of Pakistanis, they are not aware. They did not give consent to kill the others. And the same thing is true about the Germans. Now, let's look at the how do you know? So the problem is many people, they look at the media reports and they say, well, this community is being a problem. But there's a lot of problem. Firstly, media believes in making, as I explained in the first section, they believes in blaming some community more than other community. So we cannot say really the media reports are unbiased. And there is a very psychological trait called virtuous victimhood. This is studied in very seriously in psychology. So idea is you try to show that you are a victim so that you can actually attack others. So if you look at the Nazis, if you read the Nazis, it looks like the Nazis are the victim of the Jews, not the other way around. But Nazis gained the power by this victimhood and then they killed the Jews, right? So essentially, at the end of the day, they are virtuous victims who actually uh, made the Jews the real victim. So if you look at the media, you don't know. Even in the BBC, when the Nazis attacked Poland, BBC reported the Polish police, they are attacking the Nazis. That was the media that time. Now, the only way I can do this using the tacit knowledge framework by uh, Hayek, Friedrich Hayek. So basically, this says everybody knows in his domain, in his experience. So both the victim and the aggressor, they know who is victim, who is aggressor. Now, what the aggressor will do? They know that they are aggressing, they have no threat, so they'll stay here. But the victim, they fight, resist, but after some time, when they see that there's no way, they'll leave out. They'll go to other place. So they, because they'll migrate out, the population proportion of the victim community will diminish. This is what happens with the Jews. If you look at the Nazis and Jews, look like both are kind of similar. But of course, you can see the Jews population is going down, Nazis are going up. If you look at Tibet, same thing. Tibetans are going down, others are going up. Of course, there could be some issues with Parsis leaving India. Here maybe the source of intolerance is little different. Maybe India did not allow entrepreneurship of the Parsis, right? So basically, it's the state leading intolerance on Parsis because they are very productive community. So many of them left India. But that doesn't. They are not also complaining that someone who have been persecuted. So there is no. It's not conflicting. Now, if you look at this framework, we need to have a case where, so basically there are many cases, 4 cases. Majority having LTSE and the minority having LTSE. Basically, both the hypotheses saying the same thing. Majoritarian says the minority will diminish. LTSE says, well, anyone can diminish, but it depends on who is more powerful. So anyway, here I give cases like Sri Lanka and Myanmar, these cases. But you cannot say that this hypothesis can be denied or this can be rejected. So suppose the majority is without LTSE, minority is also without LTSE, then basically the data is very difficult to find. And like the Brazil, nobody knows who is white, who is black, and you don't know who is anyone, so you cannot really conclude anything. Then basically majority has an LTSE, but minority without LTSE. Again, both the hypotheses will say the minority population will decrease. And that's what is happening in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. But again, you cannot say really one hypothesis is better than other. Now, the last case where the implications are different, in this case, majority is without LTSE and minority with LTSE. So the majority hypothesis will say the minority population should decrease, but LTSE says different. It says the majority population should actually. So this is the test bed. You know that this can distinguish which is true. Other cases that was not possible. Now here you can see that actually majority population has decreased. And because majority population, the Hindus at the time of independence, like 88% or so, now they are 78%. It could be even less. And there are also, of course, you can see that basically, and India is not the only case. There are cases like Lebanon and Tibet, the same. So what happened? So basically here, the majoritarian hypothesis is rejected. LTSA hypothesis is found to be true. And you can see some examples how it is happening, but I'll leave it to you. Of course, this is the case of India that I described. That proportion of Hindus actually 84%. Sorry, I made a mistake. Now it has come down to below 80%. And then, of course, Muslim population has grown from below 10% to over 12, 14%. And there's a lot of issues with LTC of political Islam. So there are a lot of Deobandi schools. They don't teach very positive things. Recently, the story of Gangopadhyay Hind, which is of course a political thing, that waging war against India that is being taught. All these things are going on. And then there are also other examples of non-LTC minor majority, like in Nepal. Again, same thing happened. Here again, Hindu population fell from 8. This is the story of Nepal. 89% almost were Hindus, and they actually fell to 81%. And then Tibet, the same thing happened. Lebanon, the same thing happened. Lebanese Christians are Orthodox, So they are like they do not have much LTC. On the other hand, the Muslims have an LTC of Arab nationalism and socialism, and Christians they fell from 51% to 32%, while the Muslim population went up. Now, this is not very surprising. There's a person, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he says, there's a book, Skin in the Game, where basically he says that intransient, means the intolerant minority, they can actually go very, very properly. And this is actually, you can see the one of the Islamist organization in India, called banned recently banned, called Popular Front of India, and they also say that you don't really raise a majority, you need very intolerance to win. That's all I have to say. Now, what if I suppose we are all wrong? Whatever I'm saying is wrong. Then, if liberalism has gone up, this should lead to basically the growth of tolerance. But liberalism is LDSC, for example. If suppose our characterization is all wrong, suppose liberalism actually stands for progress and peace. But then what happens in America? There is a study done by these professors from Cornell, I think Cornell and Stanford, Ivy League universities, and they have found that compared to 4 decades ago, US intolerance has gone down. The tolerance has gone down. Intolerance has gone up. And this is the time 1970s when this liberal dogmas entered the American university. So this actually you can see the result. Again, there's a recent study which is also concluded last 4 years. Same thing happened. The last part I think I'll skip it, but I'll just say one thing. I'll just 2-3 minutes I'll take. So basically, the social system, there are two kinds. Ones are based on book or theory. They are called theory driven. The other kind is called basically based on collective understanding. And so this characterization has been done by many people. Of course, one is S.N. Balgangadhar. He has this book, The Hidden in the Blindness. The other book is by Thomas Sowell, The Conflict of Visions. Same idea has been expressed. And you can see that there is a difference between these two systems. Now, there are many good things in a theory-driven system. It is good for political win, but it has a weakness that it will create social intolerance because you are going by theory. You don't need to understand the other person, and if you don't understand the other person, how could it be the case that you will live harmoniously with them? That's not possible, right? Similarly, empirics-driven system, it has some problem because it is not so politically very powerful. That's why Hindus in medieval India, we have seen the Hindu states, they lost time and again because creating a political unity and is very difficult for them. But if you look at this system actually maintains a lot of social harmony and this minimizes the social intolerance. This is kind of the idea end of the day. So I think I'll skip the rest of the part and I'll just go to the last word. So basically, I have presented enough evidence. So I think I missed one thing. I said there is a problem of this paradox, right? Why media actually blaming Hindu? Because media is driven by liberalism, which is LTSE. As an LTSE, they have to attack that's not their story. They have to attack the other intolerant people. That's what LTSE does. So basically, since the people like Hindus or Buddhists, they do not have an LTSE, they are the soft target for attack, and that's what is happening in the media. And that's why it is all about India, stories about Hinduism. Now, I have given enough evidence against majoritarianism in this book. The problem is why I am the person writing this book while all over the world the liberal dogmas are going on. Because you cannot do a thesis in a liberal arts humanities by going against their dogma. It's impossible. The thesis won't be accepted. It's very difficult, or you will not be able to publish in journals. So your career is very difficult, and that's why it is not happening. So even though this understanding may not be very novel, there's no book is saying that. And this is a process that has been also told by American philosopher Alan Bloom in his book, The Closing of the American Mind. 1986, and he said that American mind is getting closed and they'll be able to uh, not see the truth. Unfortunately, the other countries are mimicking America, and that's how things are becoming worse. I think I'll stop here because 1 hour is over. Um, Thank you very much for the listening to this.
Thank you for the talk, sir. We'll start with the question and answer session. I would request Swaraj to ask his question.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. So, excellent and thought-provoking presentation. Very much. I just had a question, as you told about tacit knowledge. So, do you think that because the media in general and the academia in particular are so much invested in that majoritarian hypothesis, so they frame the events in the framework of majority versus minority? But do you think that the normal people understand on the ground level that the minority can be the aggressor and the majority can be the victim? So is it a problem that only, let us say, the intellectual class, media plus academia, is entrenched in these theories, or does it also percolate down to the non-intellectual class also?
So it depends. Thank you. That's very enlightening question. But it is a question for the. So it depends. So what happens? So it depends on the society whether you really take the lessons from life seriously. So those with more informal, what we call informal economies. So those who grew up in an informal economy, more kind of thing, they know that these formal things are not very important. They take lessons from this their own ground realization, and they don't take this majority minority thing very seriously, which is the reason that this book is selling less than what it should, because people are not very serious about majoritarianism and all these things. But then if you look at another population, they take this formality very, very seriously. Like in America, what is happening? People are going to college, like 30-40% people are going to college and they are listening to these theories in and out all the time. So they will take these theories very, very seriously and they think this is the reality. Um, so, but of course, any theory can fall with reality and all these things. But it depends also the education, how theories will infiltrate people's mind.
Thank you.
So a question asked by one of our viewers is about how, despite India being a multi-party system, the general elections to come are effectively going to be very bi-party system, sort of an contest with the two alliances. So one alliance essentially has one vote bank, and the agenda or the strategy for the other is that you have to basically denigrate this particular vote bank. So does that not make the political discourse majoritarian?
So so basically you are again saying the same point. It is saying the same point, which I was saying, that LTSs are very good for political dominance. Because what happens, LTSs, when the LTC is there, people will not look at his own realization or micro details. He has to go with the LTSC and with the community. This is what this Touchfell and Turner's theory. And this theory actually says that how the intolerance will increase, right? And this, because they are saying that because in group will be bound, so they will actually go for the intolerance of the other group. The same, yeah. So this is well accepted, and of course, this vote bank and other things is a problem. But I think there's another big problem is, of course, the other big problem which is happening is this education system. So if you look at America, for example, America did not have that problem. Here, America, 80% people are white, more than that. Maybe. So basically, America, I mean, at least it was white. Now, what happened that, but they did not need for going like that, right? There was no such fault line. But still, this country is broken and it is a very polarized country now, as you all know today, right? So because it is the education theories that could create this fault line and that could make it much. In fact, if it could have been the case that this theory doesn't matter in real life, then I did not need to spend 1 decade to write this book. Because then at the end of the day, it is useless anyway, the reality will change. But the problem is the moment the education increases, like it happened in America, it was the country's political culture and things change. The same thing could happen to us because if you go with this education system and we take this, treat this theory, teach this theory, sorry, in every department and institution. Why people are not taking my book so seriously? Because so far, I mean, I got very good reviews, but I have the opponent group, they have not reviewed it. Because the opponent group have not reviewed it, so they are not taking this book too seriously. That's what I'm thinking. They should at least write a criticism if they are taking me seriously, right? So because they see that, well, these whatever we are saying is told all the classes everywhere. What if this guy writes a standalone book? Doesn't matter.
So another question is about how the national identity and the religious identity of Hindus sometimes goes hand in hand. So Indian Hindus are in luck that way because there is a lot of overlapping that happens between those identities. However, how is it that the Muslims and the Christians of India can find a civilizational relationship with the Indian essence or the Indian narrative while in keeping with their religious identity in order to
Sure.
feel less
See,
majoritarian?
that's a very nice question. So I think the basic thing that Muslims and Christians they have to discard the political theories from that, and that has not happened yet. And I know the reason because when the Christians, I'll tell you the Christian story. The other stories will be similar. Because what happens when this first encounter between the Hindus and Christians happened? Hindus are not very powerful, right? They are very colonized people. They are under occupation. So why the Christians should respect them? There's no reason for them to respect them. Always friendship happens between the equals. So if the Hindus they could be more powerful, I see there is an alliance coming among the traditional conservative societies like Christian conservatives, Indian conservatives, even Muslims. If they get rid of their linear part, like it is happening in Saudi Arabia, linear theory is being discarded, right? It is changing hugely. We can all come together to protect conservatism and the progressive LTS. So I consider the biggest LTS of the present times is the liberals. Because one of the ways you can test if it is LTSC, to ask this question that do you think you are the best because you are X? If you are asked a Muslim, do you think you are the best because you are a Muslim? Most Muslims will say no. I have to do right karma, right things, and then that's how I'll be best, right? Of course, if you ask a jihadi Muslim who is trying to do something politically very charged up, he might say, well, I'm the best because I'm Muslim. But most Muslims don't say that. Most Christians won't say that. But if you ask any decent liberal, are you the best because you are a liberal? He say, yes, I'm the best because I'm a liberal. You're not good enough to be liberal. So, in some sense, the biggest LTC is among the liberals. It does not sound like that, but that's what it is. Now, because they are more powerful, they are trying to dominate than to destroy all the conservatives. And it is happening in very big way in America. In churches, I can see that people are saying that Jesus, pastors are saying, not people, pastors are saying Jesus is the son of two dads. That kind of nonsense is being peddled in some sense because this liberalism they are successful in taming down the conservative part completely, right? So I see that a lot of things could happen, but then that could only happen when the Hindus they speak very non-aggressively, they speak ahimsa, but with a lot of power, a lot of power.
Another question is, sir, that while India's overall growth rate is falling, it is less so in the case of the Muslim minority. So that as a minority group is thriving. So can growth rate of a particular religious community be also a parameter in understanding whether a country is majoritarian or not?
So the problem is here the LTSE will actually explain why the growth rate will be less. Because the LTSE says that you have to protect the theory. If it is protect the theory, you have to allot a lot of time for that, right? So I have shown in actually numbers, hard numbers, I have shown the Hindus and Muslims very similar in terms of income. But what is happening? Hindus are having less children, so they could afford a greater part of their income towards education and human capital, which is not case true for the Muslims, right? And so therefore, because they have to allocate a lot of resources for a lot of more children, other things, and then population control bill. Why there is so much things are coming from Muslim quarters, some resentment. So there is the people with LTS, they are angry. And it is, I'm not saying that most Muslims are angry. Most Muslims may or may not have any notion of understanding, what this go this way. But the narratives are built by a few people in each community, and then they are angry, right? Because so the moment this goes down, maybe I think the Muslims can do just as well the Hindus.
So recently, as the CAA has been implemented, there's a certain statement that was made by Amartya Sen ji, who's again a celebrated economist and a Nobel laureate. He said that, as far as I can see, one of BJP's purposes in implementing the CAA is to reduce the role of minorities and make them less important, and in a direct and indirect way, increase the role of the Hindu majoritarian forces in India, and to that extent, undermine the minorities. So, do you, in your opinion, think the implementation of CAA is a majoritarian move?
So I have discussed in book in detail. So firstly, Amartya Sen should chastise the country where he lives in, America, because there are two laws there. These laws are called Lutenberg and just let me just see
I
the
believe
name.
Spectre Lautner.
Spectre is an amendment, and the
Okay.
original was called the um, original was Lautenberg Amendment. So here, many religious minority groups from Soviet Union very mentioned particularly. They include Jews, they include evangelical Christians, and all these people. They are given citizenship in America. So America themselves are doing a law based on religious differentiation. So it doesn't befit Amartya Sen to chastise India when what he thinks that the mocha of social tolerance in America, they are doing the same thing. Secondly, what he said is actually wrong. This CA will only give citizenship maybe 30,000 people or so, not more than that. Definitely that will change, that will not change demography anyway, rather than that. Of course, and this is not changing citizenship for anyone.
Sir, another question that was asked in relation to the CAA was, which may be a little extraneous to what we are discussing today, but there was a question about why Tamil Hindus in Sri Lanka have not been included in the implementation.
Well, that's I am not an authority on that. I have only own personal views, which may not be important for this thing. But what I think is that the CA was done based on the idea that it is related to 1950s. What happened? There's a lot of persecution of minorities happened in Pakistan, and there's a Nehru-Liaquat Pact that was signed that they will protect each other's minorities. Since that pact has not been observed well, that's why those countries which are part of Indian civilization and milieu, uh, but actually got separated along with the partition. So those countries are only included. Afghanistan actually, so Bangladesh and Pakistan comes directly like that. Afghanistan actually, what happens in when the British were in power, a lot of people from Pakistan, many of the Sikhs and Hindus, they used to live in Afghanistan and do their business there. So one famous person is Uttam Malhotra. He actually has a shop there, and when Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, he actually was in a house arrest, under house arrest, and he left his house and he went to Peshawar and then to Kabul. And when he was in Kabul and trying to, and then eventually he escaped to Germany. So in Kabul, he spent 56 days in the house of Uttam Malhotra. So it shows basically there's a strong Indian Hindu and Sikh community was there, who were no longer there. Maybe a few hundreds are there, maybe even not there. But that's why it was being brought under that. Tamil Nadu, it's a very different episode, I think.
Thank you very much, sir. I think this concludes the question answer session as well. Thank you so much for sparing time from your very busy schedule for this talk, and this will just mark the end of our. This will mark just the beginning of our association from here on, and we wish to have many such talks with you. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.